I think that this is not an investment in our community. It's an investment for the investors. It's different than people we know that have put in new businesses or remodeled businesses on the square, for instance, that live in our community, work in our community, have kids in our community, that sort of thing. This is an investment, just money for the investors. I'm not against progress. I just think that this is just not the right place, the right time. I know that people want to bring in more tax revenue for the schools. I'm a teacher, not in East Troy, but I am a teacher, and I acknowledge that that's an issue and that people always want to keep that in the back of their minds, but I don't think this is the right place or way to go about doing that. I'm not going to say it right. The tax district that you mentioned,
Tax
TID.
increment district.
Yeah, I would like to know more about that. I'm hoping that you will either talk about that or lay out the pros and cons of that. And that, I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that during the last meeting or one of the previous meetings about a month ago that I was unable to attend, I didn't appreciate that the developers, even though they were consciously trying to avoid having a unsightly parking lot on Main Street, right there, a very large unsightly parking lot across from the mobile home park, that they said they would put up a berm because they and trees because they didn't want to look at that, which is the community of people that live across the street, many of whom I know and care about. And I didn't appreciate that comment. This is not an investment in our community. This is a financial investment for the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizen participation? Going once, going twice. Okay, I will close citizen participation. We will move on to approve the Plan Commission minutes from September 11th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, concept review for Overlook Ridge, a proposed planned development district consisting of 145 multifamily dwelling units. Sewall Development applicant, application 2023-22. So we have Kevin Sewall here back again. So what I'd like to do, and I'm going to ask this to the board here, or the commission here, is this is not formally, like, I guess, called out. I would like to make a motion to allow individuals to come up and ask questions after Kevin's presentation, and we've had a chance. We're not making a decision tonight. We're not going to talk about, oh, I'm for it, or I'm against it, or, that would be at the public hearing when we're ready to make any types of, changes or whatnot. This is purely information gathering, so feel free to engage in a discussion on that, and then, so I'll make that motion, and if there's a second and we agree, then I'll talk about.
I'll second it.
Okay.
It's going to be more like a committee of the whole.
Kind of like a committee of the whole, but I mean, we can't make a decision on this item anyway. So, all right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. So, for those of you in the audience, if you do have a question, I'll ask that we let Kevin finish his presentation, let us run through some questions, and then you can come up, and we just try to keep it orderly, and we'll try to cycle through it. Make it a little easier than what it was last time. Is that okay, Kevin? Okay. So if you want to go ahead and start your updates based upon the feedback from our last meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So first I want to introduce Ryan Knopp. He's been with us now for a little bit over a year. He's our Vice President of Construction, so he's the perfect person to answer any sort of construction-related questions or cost-related questions that may come up. So kind of just based upon the feedback that we got from the last meeting, I wanted to gather, I guess, some additional material, and this isn't everything we're going to see before the board makes a decision on the development, but I think hopefully this answers a lot of the questions that you guys had and a lot of the questions that the community had as well. So the first thing that we put together here is kind of a rendering. So we had a lot of questions about obviously, as we heard about the landscaping and the parking lot. So this is kind of an overhead shot that kind of shows this is what the top-down view of the development would look like. This isn't the full landscape plan, so this doesn't show the berm or things like that we're going to be adding. But it does show kind of a lot of the trees that we have around it that'll hopefully kind of screen it from some of the neighbors, as well as kind of some of the trees and some of the plantings that we're going to put kind of in front between the road there. And then that'll also give you guys a better view of what that parking lot would look like. So if Eileen could go to the next. So that is kind of what our original concept was for the building. We can go through these couple of them pretty quickly. I spoke with our architect and I just kind of asked him to put a few other concepts together. Obviously, this is still in more of a conceptual phase a little bit. I think based on some of the feedback, we're going to be kind of dialing in a couple of additional design elements as well. So. Yeah, and it's another rendering. We have 3 of them there.
Well, 2 of your renderings had different dates on them. Have you changed your thought process as far as that goes?
In terms of the colors, I think we're just kind of more open to kind of looking at a couple of design options. I think that's a better way of saying it. Yeah, like I don't know if my thought process for design has changed. I think my design.
I'm just asking
Yeah.
because there were 2 different dates on the pictures that we got.
Yeah, and I just reached out to our architect and said, hey, do you mind some of the other concepts that you had, do you mind putting them into renderings and shooting them over? Yeah. And then another question that I know we got a lot was about the different heights of buildings. And a lot of them we felt like were really valid questions because I'll be honest with you, I don't see a lot of 4-story flat roof buildings around. So if someone asked me what's the average height of a 4-story flat roof building, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But so what I did was I kind of looked at a couple of other projects that you guys had within the community, and I understand this is really hard to see. So I'm kind of just going to go over the high levels. As you can see, I had to write that in there because hopefully you guys have magnifying glasses with you. So some of the other projects we kind of looked at, we found that the Point, which is a apartment complex in Mugwanago, that was 48 feet tall. It's a 3-story building with a angled roof. And whereas our project, which is 4 stories with a flat roof, stood at 47.6 feet. And then I kind of went on a couple of other examples. There's also another one was The View in Muskego. That was another 4-story flat roof building, but the way they kind of did that bottom portion was a little bit different, and so that ended up coming out at 50 feet, so slightly above ours. So I think kind of my purpose there was just to kind of show you that we have been trying to kind of keep the height of the building in mind. And then I think the best example that we have here is the last one, which is Lakeshore Ridge. And Lakeshore Ridge is a very typical, completely residential, 3-story building with a regular roof. And that came out to 48 feet. So even though we're 4 stories and we have a flat roof, we're still shorter than, or pretty much about the same. We're a couple inches shorter, 6 inches shorter. But we are shorter, nonetheless, than a 3-story building with a normal roof. So that's kind of what I wanted to present.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go through just a few things that we've collected, just feedback to various people individually, online, and others, and then we'll run through. There's some of this that relates to the question that was asked during citizen participation. So, process. This is a done deal was I guess to quote something we saw. No, again, we're just for the benefit of everybody at home and here, this is still conceptual. Then we go through a general development plan and then final development plan with any rezoning, and then rezoning changes would have to occur through the plan commission, and then so that's still out, and as you said, you still have some conceptual design changes here. Height, I think you talked about that. That was one of them. One of the others is, in our community, a lot of people know that we need to buy a new ladder truck for the fire department, and that's not a cheap investment. That purchase is not tied to this. That purchase is because the last time that it was the ladder truck was certified, it almost was not certifiable. So it is end of life, and it needs to be replaced. And not having a ladder truck to service the existing buildings that we have, and is, from a height standpoint, the height of the buildings on the square, but also large silos that we have in the more rural parts of the emergency services district, as well as barns and our senior living homes, is something we need, and not having it also adversely affects everybody's homeowners' interest or insurance rates, which I don't want that myself either. So if you got questions on that, I direct you to the Emergency Services Commission. We'll talk here a little bit about TID. So the village board and the CDA have discussed possibly this area being put into a TID. What a TID is, a tax increment district, or a TIF, tax increment financing. We just closed TID 3 at the end of last year, so it provided a tax benefit to the residents, but also to the budget. For us, it allowed us to absorb continuing inflationary costs without having to pass that along and go to referendum. The current business park where, and on here's the lofts, which is another development, that's TID 4. And these are usually what, Eileen, 20-something years that we go out for?
Mixed-use TID is 20 years. Blighted or rehabilitation conservation district is 27 years.
27. So, and how that works is it's an increment. So you measure it when the district is formed, and any new increment then starts to accrue to the district. When that's done, that provides us investment opportunity for the rest of that TIF. And then, as I said, if you want the TID to be in the red, or sorry, in the black, not the red. TID 3 for a long time, due to the timing, it kind of started, into 2000-ish, right? Late
Yeah,
90s,
90s.
2000. And so with the Great Recession in 08 and 09, it started to go into the red, and then it eventually came back into the black. So what that does is it allows us to focus in on improvements in that area. I guess, Eileen, I'll ask you and Tim maybe to discuss the legal definition here of what we're talking about with blighted and what that means, because I know that's a concern for people.
We've used blighted kind of interchangeably. There's two different categories this could qualify for: blighted or rehabilitation conservation. And I actually think the majority of that district that has been contemplated might actually fall in the rehabilitation conservation category. So the state just has different categories of the types of TIDs we can form. But I do want to explain, too, that when a TID is formed, there's a very specific review process that we go through. There is a joint review board that is comprised of representatives from the school district, from the county, from the village. There's the village president, there's a citizen member. So those other taxing jurisdictions take part of that. They are publicly noticed. The public's welcome to attend any of those meetings when we do form a TID.
Tim, anything you'd add?
Just a point of clarification, essentially, the increment that is going to be accruing each and every year, that's money that's available for financing things within the district, and it's not generally available to the school district or to the village until the TIF goes away,
Till it's paid in full.
till it's paid in full. So it could be, 10, 15, 20 years, theoretically, before the actual tax benefit is seen at the local level.
As a part of that process, Ellers, who is our financial advisors for the village, they will be working with Sawal in doing a pro forma analysis to look at what is there, why is there a need for a TID or a TIF, but also making sure that our pro forma for the projection that, we don't end up, we did this, now we're in the black, or I keep getting my colors backwards. We're in the red, not the black. So some of the initial pro formas that we've looked at have it accruing a good amount of benefit for this area. So, but again, that's an economic number. It's not the only consideration. Trying to look here at the rest of this. I think that's it. Taxes, economic impacts, county and state taxes will increase. Doing a development like that, that's not the case. Rents are too high. I guess, Kevin, can you speak to, I think you and Art talked a bit about rents, but just how they, from your market standpoint, how they compare, what you're thinking?
Yeah, so based upon kind of our projected rents that we've put into our pro forma and that we've analyzed, we're always very conservative when it comes to rent in terms of how we think about rents. So usually what we do is we'll get a large sample of different apartment complexes. That's why this was all readily available information for us. And we kind of analyze, like, what are the rents, what are the rent costs per square foot, and then based upon that data, I have a big fancy spreadsheet, and that gives me what is the average market rent, and then based upon that, I usually go a little bit lower, and that becomes our rent. So we believe our rents are incredibly competitive with the market, and we think they're exactly where they should be, if not a little bit lower.
Okay, thank you. Sidewalks to the square cost property owners to pay for the sidewalk. So sidewalks, when they're initially put in, are not charged to the property owner if they're put in front. Yes, owners then will need to maintain them, and I have a sidewalk on my property, so I get the benefits of shoveling it every winter. But I do like my sidewalk. So, but that really the only other cost ever occurs if there was we had to replace sections of it. Let's see. Pressure on services, again, schools, water, sewer, streets, police, EMS, these types of things. We're adding the proposed budget for next year will include our first new police officer position in 30 years due to the state funding that we've been getting, so that's not tied to this development. Water and sewer, things like that, any infrastructure improvements that are needed would be as a part of the structure within the TIF or the TID. Developer was offered an alternate location to build and refused it. This is your property, correct?
Yes, we own the property.
Okay. It's not village-owned. Okay, and then I think the rest of these are designed, so I'll let you address them because it's your design. I think you talked a little bit about it, and we heard some of this. I think some of the feedback is just making sure, and I think you touched on it a little bit, of that the facade, the design fits a little bit more with the downtown look and feel. And so maybe can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so we're currently going back, like, we think that the design we have for the property, we really like the design, just being completely upfront. I think it's really good. I think one of the things that when we first looked at developing in East Troy, I actually took a tour with Scott Seeger, your old village president, and he kind of showed me a bunch of the different apartment complexes and things like that. And I actually took our architect, Adam, as well. And based upon that, we kind of talked about what sort of design elements do we want to use for this building? Because it's not on the square, but it's also kind of part of the square. So there needs to be it's almost like a middle point between what you have at Honey Creek and what you have on the square. So that's kind of how we came up with that design. That being said, there is a process, there's an internal review process that we're going through to kind of look at some of the elements. Like, I know there's some downtown design standards, and we're kind of looking at, is it possible to incorporate some of those standards into the design?
And then I think another design question, and I think Art addressed this, but I'll let you answer it again, is why not condominiums rather than apartments?
I don't think for that site, personally, I don't know if condos are a good fit for that site. I think it's a multifamily site. Specifically, when you look at the businesses on the square, you have a ton of great businesses on the square, and with condos, you can't get the same amount of density. The condo market is a two-family side-by-side product. If we did condos, we could probably get 30 condos in there, which one doesn't make sense for what the cost of the land is, what the cost to do the earthwork for the land. There's a lot of site costs associated with that parcel, specifically site utility costs, grading costs. There's a lot of bad soils on that site. If you sold two side-by-side condos, the price would just be astronomical. It wouldn't make sense.
Kevin, I'm sorry, Matt, if I may. I know you mentioned one thing about condos, but now are these more like duplexes or townhomes rather than larger condo buildings, high-rise?
Yeah, the condo, like high-rise building, we're really only seeing that in downtown Milwaukee. That kind of market has kind of shifted away. It's a great question. And what we're seeing now, specifically more in kind of like suburban, rural areas, and like kind of communities such as East Troy, is kind of more of those side-by-sides.
The one other question, I had some people mention to me about, they thought that would be better for single-family homes. Now, and my question is, the premise here is, if you were to do that, about how many homes could you put on that lot feasibly?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I based upon, I'm not a single-family home builder, so I mean, everything I'm going to tell you is just complete speculation, so just take it as you will. But I'll gladly answer the question. So like, I think the majority of houses specifically in this area, you're going to want to have probably a quarter acre to a half acre lot. And what are we talking about? We're talking about 10 acres. So on that site, so that's, you're looking at like 10 homes, maybe 20, yeah.
After streets, roads, and public stuff and everything else, yeah, you're probably at the max 20, if
Yeah,
that.
if that. I mean, just depending on the grades too. That site has some pretty wonky grades also. So.
I think I've, unless I missed something, I think I hit through most of the questions that I was aware of. So I want to open it up to the rest of the board. Thank you for your patience. You guys have questions for Kevin?
I'll start. So have you built one of your facilities in a town such as small as East Troy?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of one of the things I was thinking about, like, ending the presentation on, but I think I'll talk about this now. So, like, the last time we did our presentation, we showed you kind of all of those different apartment complexes that we build. And the reason we show you that isn't just to say, like, we're awesome, right? Like, we wouldn't do that. It's more to kind of show you, like, we've built in these types of communities, and every single one of those sites tells a specific story, and there was a challenge to that site, whether it was a site like this, like with where you have soil challenges, or you had just a ton of different challenges, and each site, we came and we worked with the community, similar to you guys, and we figured out how to overcome those challenges. So yeah, we're really familiar with these communities, such as East Troy, and we have hopefully, like you saw that, and I think some of that was kind of maybe lost in the translation of the last presentation, but hopefully you guys saw that as we kind of went through. Each one of those sites was built in a community like this, and each one of those sites had the same amount of challenges, such as this one.
So what were like how many developments like this have you done in the past?
Now you're making me count. So I think in total we've done 6. And
So what were like the last 3?
the last?
And in what communities were those in?
Yeah, so we did Sturtevant. We did how many? 228. 228 units. So you guys were really putting me on the spot here. I'm getting nervous. I was not expecting to get grilled. Like, I just want to say that. Like, when Matt was like, "Here are the chairs you're going to sit in," I was like, "Oh man, I got to sit up straight." But so yeah, so we did 228 in Sturtevant. Before that, we did 279 units in Lannon, which, I mean, that's very rural. And then before that, we did 72 units in Union Grove. Yep.
You were all over the place.
We are, yeah.
So why East Troy? You hear, and you've heard, we've heard, is that this doesn't fit in our community, right? So in your mind, in your professional opinion, and you've built many of these, why East Troy? Why this community? Like, what draws you here?
Because East Troy is awesome. That's where the clapping starts, because you guys all love East Troy. No, because East Troy is awesome, though. Like, so the first time I drove through East Troy, I'll be honest, I knew nothing about East Troy. I knew absolutely zero. And then we kind of start driving. We drive to the square, and I see all these awesome different things. Like, you have a coffee shop, right? Like, you have there's this pot pie. I live in Genesee Depot now, just so you know. So that's how much I loved East Troy. I was like, how can I have a decent commute to my office in Sussex, but also kind of live in this area? But you guys have like that pot pie place. You know, they make those almond cookies. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah, can we put that on the record? Those are the best cookies I've ever had. So you guys just have all these cool things. You have a brewery. Like, how many communities have breweries? Sussex doesn't even have a brewery, right? I've been trying to get a brewery to be in one of our spaces in Sussex for 5 years, and I can't do it. And you guys have one just down the road. So, I mean, you guys have all these amazing different things here in East Troy. It's hard to say, like, why wouldn't we want to do something? This is perfect. Like, all of these businesses are right here, and we're hoping that we're going to build something that people can just walk to those businesses and use those businesses.
All right, so I was not able to attend, excuse me, I got a little bit of cold here too. I was not able to attend the last meeting, so it was my first time meeting you guys. I did watch the YouTube. First off, I want to thank you guys for choosing our community. I think this is a great development for this area, this strip. Now, I've been in East Troy for 45 years, so I've seen changes. Hardee's coming to town. Everybody's in an uproar about the Hardee's coming to town. But eventually you get past it. I think you guys are, the way you're approaching this, trying to work with us, to work with matching the downtown, the setback on it, it's not a 4-story right, 25 feet off the road, okay? You're setting it back. I just want to go on the record that I do appreciate you guys wanting to work with us, and I do definitely want to work with you guys and push this forward and move this forward, and I think it's going to be kind of a Kickstarter to the rest of the development coming into town, because our corridor is not something that you want to look at coming into this town. So this would be a nice start. So thank you.
Thank you.
When you're going to build this, you were saying on the back porch or facing the back, south, I guess you want to call it, backyard, all those trees that are there, they're all going to have to be cut down and taken away, aren't they? Because I think if you go back there, you're going to look out and see wetlands or a swamp, and then the old Trend 2 building, or not building's not there anymore, but the land where it was at. Now, all those trees are gonna, what are you gonna do with all those trees?
I mean,
It's just,
potentially some of them would have to come down. I mean, obviously, I think some of them that are more closer to the property line would. I think we're going to try to keep a lot of the trees intact, because that's a big part of development, right? You think about erosion control. It's as developers, it's something that we constantly talk about, is erosion control. And obviously, the more you cut down trees, obviously, the more you destabilize the soil. Bigger the tree, right? You have a bunch of old trees out there. You have a bunch of really great root systems. I really love erosion control. So you have a bunch of really great root systems that really stabilize that soil. So then what you would do is you just replace it with other plantings. So if we had to cut down a bunch of trees, there's a ton of different ways to do it. There's riprap, there's just a bunch of different ways to kind of stabilize that soil. One of the ways we've specifically outlined in our plan is on that slope, we're actually going to be planting erosion control grasses. So if you go out in your lawn and you pull out your lawn, the root's about this big. But if you pull out these, the root's actually about this big. So that's going to help lock down that soil and stabilize it. So we have obviously, I don't make those decisions. We have a team of experts who are very qualified in making those decisions.
so if you cut a lot of them down, we'll just say 50%, and you're gonna add stuff to it. But what about the people that are up on the 3rd and 4th floor? They're gonna look out, they're gonna still see that swamp area or wetlands. Isn't that what's back there?
Yeah, I I really like that. I actually think that's a big amenity for us, is kind of looking out into the nature preserve area there. That was one of the reasons why we were really attracted to the site, is because when you drive onto it, at the time, it was the old truck station, and I think there was that older house that was abandoned. But when you go past that tree line and you look, I really like that view. So I think that's actually an amenity that our fourth floor, and I think actually all of our residents are really going to enjoy. That's part of the reason why we added the overlook deck as well, which is kind of that big concrete deck that we have in the middle of the two buildings. We kind of jutted that patio out a little bit so that we could put chairs and benches and picnic tables so people can enjoy that.
One question I was going to ask is a little bit about, can you talk a little bit about traffic and congestion, some of the concerns there about School Street and turning lanes, and what are your other traffic studies and similar developments shown you?
Yeah, so what we find is, obviously a lot of times we're hearing more about the work from home thing that's becoming really popular. So I think we're really losing about 20% of our residents are probably not even going to have a commute. And like I said, that's a completely fictitious number that I've just spit out there. And then the rest of them, the majority of the traffic that's going to be leaving, we're probably going to get some that leave at 7 or whatever to commute to Milwaukee, or 6:30. And then we may have some that commute later. It's kind of up in the air. What we generally find is that not everyone's going to leave at once, because, living in East Troy, I'm sure all you guys, everyone here has a different commute. So same thing, most of our residents here are going to have a different commute, so.
I want to open it up to our earlier motion, unless there are other questions here. So to anybody in the audience, if you have questions you want to pose, just come up and. And for the record, can you just please state your name and address?
Vision Street, East Troy. Kevin, you mentioned about cost of your apartments. You never actually broke down the exact numbers for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. What are you looking at for those said type?
And this is a complete projection, but for studios, we're looking at about 1,000 to 1,100. 1-bedrooms, probably about 1,500. 2-bedrooms, 1,800 to maybe 2,000. And then 3-bedrooms will probably be around 2,300. With the majority of our units being 1s and 2-bedrooms. I think we have like ballpark 5% studios and 5% 3-bedrooms.
Okay. For the Planning Commission, you mentioned about, for like improvements to the infrastructure. I did not understand, how would that be paid or compensated for to have to improve, electricity or the sewer or the laterals, et cetera? I did not understand it. Could you clarify that?
Sure. Sure. I don't think there would be necessarily electrical improvement needs there from a.
I don't know. There wouldn't be.
And we'd have to evaluate based on their finalized plan if there is any need for water and sewer. There were some upgrades done to that as a part of the ES road construction, so that's already done. But if there is needed, that would be part of whatever is in that tax increment district financing. That would be part of that whole. And again, that district would be larger than just this property.
Okay, that's why I wanted to get a clear understanding. So that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that tax increment financing, that money comes from the taxes the developer pays on their development. So they bring value with their development, they pay taxes, those taxes go back in the TID, and that pays for those improvements.
Thank you. That's why I rely so heavily on you. Other questions? Going once? Come on up, Leon.
I apologize if you guys have already addressed this, because I wasn't here probably for a long time. But anyway, what kind of job opportunities will this bring to the community? And I'm not talking about construction, but once it's settled, do you have your own teams that are like maintenance and management, property management and that kind of thing? Or will you draw that from the community?
So that's a good question. So when we kind of think about staffing these developments, we do try to draw from within the community, obviously, as much as possible. I think someone who is a property manager specifically who lives in East Troy is going to do a better job than someone, I mean, I wouldn't say guarantee that, but they probably would have more passion about the community. So when we make hiring decisions, we do try to look within the community as much as possible. But that being said, a complex of this size would probably have about 3 office people working there and maybe 1 or 2 maintenance techs, maybe 2, yeah.
What kind of annual projections do you believe that this development would bring revenue to East Troy? What kind of revenue per year projections do you have?
I think based upon the last PowerPoint we did, I think it's actually in that one of the sheets that I handed out. I think it's 26 million? That's what we're looking at?
So that's the
projected value?
so
Right.
how much are they spending on the square going, or coming down to your restaurant, or?
Well, having done a number of these, I mean, that would be one of the enticements to the community to know if there are, what kind of revenue projections would the community benefit from of having 148 units, 145 units?
Your question, Leon, is probably not to the specific, like, on average, a resident is going to go out and spend X amount of dollars in East Troy, every week or whatever. But what we can look at is the valuation, as Kevin talked about, and what does that mean from a tax standpoint, and what does that mean from a valuation and our ability to improve other properties within this kind of redevelopment type view of things as we improve this corridor into the village. So that, as they finalize more of their design and our Ellers team works with them, that'll have to be part of another presentation and conversation. So I don't think we're at that point just yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good question. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Okay. I'm going to say, does anybody else on the commission have anything? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Okay. We'll move on to item 8. Annexation of 2 parcels, 4.5 acres, located at the northwest corner of North Street, Highway 20, and Main Street, Anderson Commercial Group, applicant Ray Gooden Agent, application 2023-23. You see there Tim's memo and a proposed motion. Any questions? The applicant is here. Any questions for the applicant or for Tim?
I think it fits. I mean, the other 3 corners out there on that highway are all the highway business, and I mean, that's essentially a remnant from the vast melon farm is the residents out there. Am I right, John? Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad you clarified you were asking, are you right to John and not to me, because I wouldn't know if that used to be a melon farm. Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend to the village board the property described in the annexation petition submitted by Anderson Commercial Group be temporarily classified as highway business under the village's zoning regulations.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 9, certified survey map at terminus of South Executive Drive, RA 498700002, Village of East Troy, ourselves, applicant, application 2023-24. And again, you see the memo from Tim.
While we have a pause in the action here, I just want to note that the certified survey map will be having an additional easement along the west property boundary line that will go from the end of the cul-de-sac to the south and then over to a stormwater basin. So,
I assume that's to pick up the rain runoff on the streets and the roads?
correct.
I'll make a motion as soon as I find it here. Oh. Oh, I see. Yeah, I will recommend to the village board the approval of the certified survey map based on the general and specific conditions listed in the report.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10, discussion related to standards for detached garages. This is an item that we discussed a few months ago, and Tim, do you want to kind of walk through what you've prepared here?
So, yeah, as you mentioned, there was a property owner who was part of the public comment, talked about his situation. He's got an older house, and it's I don't say historical, but it's an older house, and it does not have an attached garage, and he wants to have a garage area, but the detached allotment for floor area is rather small. And essentially, because he doesn't want to attach it to the detriment of the house, he's kind of penalized because of doing that. So this is intended to, kind of allow the same amount of floor area, except in a larger detached building. As indicated, we're just amending, the section that does talk about detached floor area. And what I did was to simply increase the numbers that currently exist for, again, a freestanding detached building by 350 square feet, which is just a little bit smaller than a typical two-car garage.
Tim, you correct me though if I'm wrong. This is for homes that do not have an attached garage, correct?
Correct. And typically, this is going to be an older building, and that's why there's a date in here that the building would have to be constructed before a magic date of January 1st of 1980.
Yeah, and I think also with this particular property owner, it did have a detached garage that burned. And
Correct.
I think the size of it exceeded, though, the ordinance, and so it was kind of grandfathered in.
Right.
It was a three-car garage.
And then the other part to this is if somebody wanted to take advantage of it, again, they wouldn't have an attached garage, but there would be a deed restriction that basically would prevent them from at a later date saying, oh, well, now I want to have an attached garage as well. So they get one or the other.
Thoughts on Tim's proposed ordinance changes?
I think it makes sense.
Are we good with January 1st, 1980, or is that just a fictitious date we put out there?
It's a magic date. Again, obviously, somebody, building nowadays, they will typically have an attached garage, right? Years ago, it was not necessarily all that common. So, again, it's just kind of winnowing out the, how many houses that we're going to actually be dealing with. And again, it's typically going to be the older houses in the downtown core. So,
I think we start with that date, and if we need to make changes in the future, we make more changes. So process-wise, draft it and then send it to through us for the November cycle?
So, yeah, I mean, if you're so inclined that the ordinance as drafted, complies with what you're trying to accomplish, then you would simply make a motion to direct the staff to set a public hearing date for some time in the future. It would probably be in November. Then there would be a public hearing, and then if it moves forward, then the village board has the final say.
I'll make a motion to direct staff to finalize the drafting of this and post a public hearing for the November Plan Commission meeting.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 11, recommendations for future agenda. So we still have the polystructures as accessory uses in residential zoning districts, tiny homes as accessory uses in residential zoning districts. Is that related to some of the feedback we got on our ordinance from the housing?
So originally, this came with Scott. You had been approached by a property owner saying, hey, I know your code says you can have a tiny home.
You could have an in-law suite in the backyard. And for the people in here.
So again, this is on the laundry list of things to do. So it's not the intent to, debate it now, per se, but
I was just
to
trying to get the
clarify.
back, I was not
Yes.
recalling where this came from.
Yes.
The background is previous administration, when they redid the code, somehow, I guess I've never seen it, but all of a sudden it came up when somebody wanted to put an in-law unit in their backyard. And I'm like, you can't do that. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, I guess you can. And I didn't think that's what the village really wants. Because, I mean, it's, you can have an in-law suite, but what happens to them after they're gone when you have a house in your backyard? So that's why I asked him to put it on there, because I can't, at least I don't believe that the village wants a second house in backyards.
Okay, that's good. All right, polystructures, that was the quasi coverings for cars and, okay. Make sure I got my terminology correct here. And so you're still researching that one?
Yes.
Okay.
The other kind of topic of discussion was tiny homes relative to cottage housing. I think that was brought up by 40. And I think there's going to be something on a later agenda, kind of talking about that, along with some other issues with regard to affordable housing, and we'll just kind of roll that into that discussion.
Yeah, so Eileen went to, was it Walworth County and Waseda? Did a housing summit a few weeks ago, and so she's got a lot of really good information for us, kind of pertains to our conversation to earlier this evening. And so we're going to try to do a joint village board, plan commission, and maybe even CDA. A little busy with budgets right now, so. All right, revised application requirements for rezoning petitions, just process improvement, and then potential regulations, information related to front yard setbacks on side-loaded homes. Okay, any other items for Tim's list? Okay. Our next meeting is November 13th at 6:30. It will be needed, given our previous motion. And I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Good night.